Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session in the Plan Notes series. This series was organized by the APA-IL Professional Development Committee. My name is Gabrielle Mattingly. I'm a planner with the City of Naperville and also the chair of the Professional Development Committee. Today's topic will focus on managing public meetings. So thank you all for spending some time with us today. This webinar is eligible for 1.5 certification maintenance credits for live viewing only. If you would like to pursue those credits, please use the link that we posted in the chat towards the end of today's webinar to access the online evaluation. The link will also be provided in a follow-up email. And this webinar is going to be recorded, but again, CM credits are only available for live viewing. Today we are joined by expert guest speakers, Peter Friedman and Michael Blue. Peter is a partner at Elrod Friedman LLP. Peter has an accomplished and broad real estate and government law practice representing both private and public sector clients in all phases of government operations, real estate finance, acquisition, development, zoning, and land use matters. He is the co-founder of Elrod Friedman LLP and serves as the firm's general counsel. Michael Blue, FAICP, is a principal at Tesca Associates. Michael's time working in both the public and private sectors of planning have given him an eclectic perspective of the field and how consultants can best serve communities. Prior to joining Tesca Associates in 2013, Michael was the director of community development in Highland Park, Illinois for 11 years. Before we jump into today's session, I would like to introduce you all to Colleen Malik. Colleen is a planner with the Village of Mundelein and is on the Professional Development Committee. Colleen is going to provide a brief overview of today's session and is going to key up the $1 million question for our speakers. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. Before we turn it over to our speakers, I just wanted to run through what to expect. If you attended our first session of this series, you might already be familiar with this format. Our speakers are going to kick things off first by responding to a broad $1 million question to sort of break the ice. And then after that question, everyone's going to get assigned to a breakout room for 30 minutes to tackle 3 unique public meeting scenarios of their own with their small group. Each breakout room has a pre-assigned scribe that's going to take notes on the group's thoughts with Google Slides. We had our scribes volunteer ahead of time and they were given instructions. So there's no need to choose one amongst yourselves once you get into your breakout room. That's the biggest change from the last session. So thank you everyone that provided feedback. We thought this would make things go a little bit smoother and faster. And so after this 30-minute breakout room, all attendees will return back to the main room and our 2 speakers, Michael and Peter, will give us their take on how they would tackle all these different scenarios. And then just a couple notes before we start. Just know that the breakout room answers don't need to be presented by anybody afterwards to the larger group. All of these Google Slides with the group notes are going to be shared afterwards with attendees as a Cliff Notes guide of sorts about managing public meetings. So you'll get a follow-up with the notes. And then one last note for our scribes, if your group has questions for the speakers that you want them to answer, feel free to put that question anywhere on the slide and the speakers will be able to see it and they can answer that question when it goes back to them. And also feel free to reformat the slide as needed to fit the text and answers your group has. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Michael Blue and Peter Friedman to get their take on today's $1 million question, which is how do you control things you can't control?
Michael, feel free.
I'm so used to deferring to you, Peter, that
I know.
I think in full disclosure, we should tell people that we have worked together on and off for the past 20-something years almost, and that if we start to argue, people shouldn't worry. It's just the way we communicate.
Just like you all communicate with your lawyers,
Yes.
respectfully, but directly.
Yeah. Oh, we could do a session on that. Anyway, in terms of the $1 million question, as Peter and I talked about this, our short answer on how do you control things you can't control is that there are going to be a lot of things that you can't control. And the interesting part about this $1 million question is that it also comes with the answer. you from where you're sitting, whether it's at the meeting or in your office, you have to be prepared to not control the things you can't control. Everybody, control freaks, please raise your hand. I know there's others of you out there. Yeah, thank you. So I think that's kind of the best overview of this. How do you control things you can't control is to accept the fact that you can't control everything. And we can talk about some of the details of that in a bit. But Peter, I don't know if you wanted to give a little bit of an overview statement on this one.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, everybody. I know Michael and I are both looking forward to all of these discussions. When I looked at those two questions, I immediately went 20,000 feet. And I kind of broke it down because I think the way you deal with those questions in the same way you deal with all of the other types of tough situations that we'll talk about is one, to keep in mind the distinction between process and procedure and substance. There's, the boards or the commissions that we're helping, they get to make the decisions. We try to make the process fair and proper, and we got to stay in that lane. And so some of this, if a commissioner wants to go off track, we can through preparation, meetings before the meeting, we can try to help that. But sometimes, as Michael said, they're not going to stay on track and they're going to go off and do whatever they want. All we can do is try to make sure and ensure that the procedure is proper, because that's what ultimately is important. And then the other thing I would say is, and this is going to flow through a lot of these discussions, is to pick your battles. We all have in our minds how we want these meetings to go. And sometimes they go exactly like we want them to. But a lot of times they don't. And when they don't, we have to just kind of swallow hard sometimes and let them go in a little bit different way without taking it personally or without, making a battle where it really, it doesn't matter. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good a lot of times. So a lot of this is taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and determining what is really important before we, put our foot down or lay down the letter of the law, to one of our elected officials.
One of the things you'll hear from us, from me in particular, is that part of the answer to these two questions about keeping commissioners on track and minimizing disruptions is structure. Adding structure to meetings is a very useful tool. Your meetings come with structure. That's what an agenda is. These are the things we're going to do. These are the order we're going to do them in. And as you find that there's more of this disruption, more structure to your agenda has merit, right? So you may have all seen agendas with time slots on them, right? So that, we'll discuss this item from 7:30 to 7:50. And what you're doing is, one, you are announcing that we are not going to talk about this forever. And two, you are arming the chair to say, hey, we've only got a couple minutes left, people, let's keep going. And so this idea of controlling things you can't control, in a lot of ways, the answer is to empower those who can control them, right? So, excuse me, the chair of your planning commission or ZBA or your village president or mayor, they've got a lot more sway in accomplishing these two examples than you probably do. And so what you need to do is think of these ways that you can add structure to the meetings that helps to empower them to accomplish these things.
Yeah, and I would add to that, one big way to empower you to be able to do that is by establishing relationships to the elected and appointed officials. And that means not just geeky planner legal talk, but just truly try to get to know them and understand them and let them get to know you and establish a relationship so that, one, they come to respect you and will take your advice, and two, will allow you, when it's necessary, to able to be frank and honest with them about something they're doing, something they could do, and it may allow them to take advice from you as to how to accomplish what they want to accomplish, perhaps differently than they think they want to accomplish. Somebody who interrupts all the time, or disrupts, they think that's the way to get what they want. I mean, there's some people who are, I suppose, just rude for the sake of being rude, but usually it's, they do it because they think that gives them a leg up. And there may be another way to do it. And if you have a relationship with an elected or appointed official, it's so much easier to have those discussions, those productive and difficult discussions, than if you're just, a staffer who they barely know, calling them up an hour before the meeting. It's just much easier if there's background there.
And Peter, I would just add the caveat to that well, is we're not suggesting that you become buddies with the elected officials or plan commissioners. There is a point of being too close. So we're not suggesting that, you get to where you're going out and having drinks with the commissioners after the meetings. That's not what we're suggesting here. But to have a strong working relationship is a very important part of all this.
Yep, totally agree.
The other thing the last thing that I would add, and Peter and I talked about this before, is that the answers to these things do not happen at the meeting, right? So you're not going to stand up at a meeting and go, all right, wait a minute, councilman, sit down. You're not going to do that at the meeting, right? Part of your responsibility is to maintain decorum and support the decorum of the meeting. But there are opportunities before and after meetings to deal with these things, right? So if you maybe call your commissioners or talk to your commissioners beforehand, if there's one that's been a problem, call them before and say, hey, do you have anything I can answer now? Or do you have any questions or anything you think might come up that I can help you with now? Similarly, if something happens at a meeting, you're not going to grind the meeting to a halt to scold a commissioner or an elected official. That's not a good idea. But after the meeting, that's a chance to talk to the chair, your department head, your manager, whoever, right? So a lot of the answers to these things happen outside of the meetings themselves.
Yeah, and the final point on that, I'm a huge believer in the preparation before the meeting and game planning it all, but that's got to happen with time to spare, not, at 4 o'clock before a 7 o'clock meeting. Like days before is when those discussions should start happening. Because a lot of these, and we'll get one example, is, a lot of these commissioners, particularly chairmen, they get nervous before these meetings. Like it's stressful for them. And sometimes they need to be in their own head before and be preparing. And they may not want to be on the phone right before the meeting. So that's what I mean by relationships, knowing who you're working with, so that you can give them time and provide helpful advice in the context that helps them.
So Colleen, Gabby, that's pretty much the answer to all the questions. Peter and I can go now and
we'll make $500,000 each.
Yeah. So, but that's kind of our overview, and I hope that helps inform the discussions that you're all going to have about these detailed scenarios, and then we're looking forward to coming back and talking to everybody about them.
Thank you, Peter and Michael. That's great feedback. So now at this point, we're going to switch into breakout rooms. So like Colleen previously noted, there's already pre-assigned scribes, and you'll be discussing 3 discussion questions within your breakout room. So we will return in approximately 30 minutes. All right, so thank you all for participating in the breakout rooms. We're now going to have our guest speakers give their expertise to some of these questions that we posed, and we're going to go through each breakout group room questions and kind of go through some of the questions and some of the responses. So Michael and Peter will start off with breakout group number 1, and I will also be flipping to breakout room group number 6 as their questions were the same.
Well, I would start here and would just point out that the word that jumped out at me here was defending. The idea of Planner Drew defending staff's recommendation. the reason the word defending jumped out at me is because you're automatically creating a conflict, right? If you're defending something, you're in conflict with somebody. And I think that as you're in this situation, because we've all had our recommendations questions, we've all had our approach questioned. Some of us have had our integrity questioned at meetings, right? So once you start defending, though, you're kind of creating the adverse situation that's going to make this worse. I would encourage Drew to think more in terms of clarifying and providing more information. And let me explain to you where we were coming from in terms of this. So I know that's not exactly what this question is about, but that's the thing that jumped out at me, is that if Drew is defending, the battle's already lost.
Yeah, and I agree with what Michael said, because defending to me sounds defensive. And all that staff and planners should be doing is providing their expertise to the elected officials. And particularly, I'm assuming for everybody, that recommendation will have already been in a staff report or provided to them. So there's never going to be any kind of ambiguity about what the staff recommendation was. The fact that at the meeting, one of the commissioners is bashing the recommendation or questioning it, again, we have to, and this goes true for lawyers a lot, we have to have thick skins on this kind of stuff. We can't, you don't have to feel like you need to win the battle, because you're not going to convince that commissioner to change their mind like that. And I don't know if anybody else has had that experience.
Well, it's tough to get somebody to, in the middle of this debate, Grace is not going to go, you know what, Drew, you're right, forget the whole thing.
Totally right, yeah.
But this also speaks to what we talked about with the $1 million question, which is find a way to talk to your commissioners before the meeting. I mean, Grace and Drew should have had this conversation before the meeting ever started. And if Grace is trying to sandbag Drew, well, then they're not going to. But if there's a chance for them to talk before the meeting, you can avoid this one.
Yeah, and Michael and I, we don't have to get into this a lot here, but Michael and I had a discussion about this, is because a lot of towns staff does not make recommendations. And so this issue, and there's pros and cons to, some towns it's practice and policy to make recommendations. Some towns it's practice and policy not to make recommendations. But one of the consequences of making recommendations is that someone's going to challenge it. And that's the nature of the beast. You can only do your job and use your expertise and make the best call you can on the recommendation. The other side of it, of course, is if you don't make a recommendation, then they look at you and like, well, what do you mean? You're our experts. Of course you have to make a recommendation. So it just brought up the push and pull of that issue.
So I'm going to move us to the second one, just to try and keep us moving along so that we don't not get to the end. And Colleen and Gabby, please keep pushing us too to make sure we get to everything. But this idea about planning for special needs, I think we talked about, our thoughts, Peter, here were that there's kind of a legal and a practical aspect to this, and practically there may not be the ability to do this. I thought the question that was interesting here is, what's the future of the hybrid meeting? I've heard a lot of communities talk about this may be something that stays because it expands public engagement and participation. So that's one way to plan for these special needs. But Peter, from a legal standpoint, maybe you could share what you had said before.
So as a policy issue, doing as much as we can for individuals who are challenged at attending meetings is of course a good thing. The Open Meetings Act has not caught up now with the technology that we've all been using for the last 18 months. And so, we can still have virtual meetings if we want to, but at some point that's going to end. And the Open Meetings Act, we're going to be right back at the Open Meetings Act we had 2 years ago. Majority of a quorum has to be there, and there's no requirement in the Open Meetings Act that we somehow provide an avenue for those that physically cannot get to the village hall. There's just no legal requirement for that. And so there's there's no requirement for a hybrid meeting. A lot of towns are doing it now where their council or boards or plan commissions or ZBAs are in person, but they're doing hybrid. So people who don't feel comfortable being at the village hall can stay at home and still participate. There's practical issues on that. Some towns just don't have the technology for that. And then there's policy issues about that. Some towns don't like, they want to be all, they want to go back to the way it was 19 months ago, everybody in the room at the same time. So a lot of going forward, unless the state legislature changes the Open Meetings Act to impose the hybrid model requirement, which I don't think they will, a lot of this is going to be municipality by municipality.
I think a lot of the suggestions that are in the notes on these two sets are also very good. The
Yeah.
practical suggestions about addressing accessibility from an ADA standpoint and whatnot. These comments are all very good. I would just want to endorse those.
So texting during meetings,
Don't do it.
yeah. So and don't do it is right, and it really doesn't matter. First of all, there's a case. This scenario happened in Champaign, and two members were texting, and the reporter sitting in the front row watching them text each other during the meeting. Surprise, surprise, the reporter FOIA'd the texts. Municipality Champaign said, no, those are on their personal devices. We don't have to FOIA it. The court said, yeah, you do, especially when they're at the meeting. We have an argument that when they're texting, when individual members are texting outside of a meeting, maybe that's not FOIAble, maybe, but when they're at the meeting, it's FOIAble. And yeah, they could argue, hey, we were just talking about where we're going to dinner later, but that still means that the staff or the village attorney has to ask them for the text to make sure they're not about public business. So legally, not a good idea, and PR-wise, a horrible idea, because, and I've seen this and had to stop it, but if 2 or 3 members are texting during the meeting, that's an Open Meetings Act violation, because it's an open meeting. And you're supposed to be talking out loud, not whispering among 3 of you. So it's just a bad practice, and it's a bad look.
Peter, can I ask you about what I consider to be the kissing cousin of texting during the meeting? So many towns have now gone to an electronic packet that, rather than sitting with paper in front of them, that commissioners and elected officials have got their computer in front of them. How do you keep them from texting or from emailing each other, or their friend who's watching at home? Asking for a friend never happened. How do you get them to not do the same problem, create the same problem with email?
It's the same answer. That once they start emailing each other, it's all FOIAble if it's at a meeting. And we tell them, I mean, it's through training, it's through getting, the village manager, the community development director, the village attorney to provide them with the law. You usually, and I say usually because no matter how many times we say this, there'll be a story in a week in the paper of somebody getting FOIA'd for embarrassing texts or embarrassing emails. I don't know how many times we can say, don't do it, but through training and words of warning from the village attorney or the manager, do not do that during a meeting. Hopefully it eliminates it, but there's always going to be those that won't listen. I like knock off the texting. That was good.
All right, so let's move on to breakout room number 2, and number 2 and number 7 have the same question. So I'll flip between the 2 of them.
Michael, you're an expert at inappropriate trustee behavior.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I resent the implication. The question here is who does this? The notes that are in here that are about talk to them individually, talk to them together. All of this sort of stuff is all the right answer. My take on it is who does this, right? So, if you're the planner one at your town who happens to be staffing the plan commission and all this goes on, this may not be for you to do, right? This is the sort of thing that you go back the next day and you talk to with your director, or even if you're a director, you may go and talk to the manager about it and see what she thinks you ought to do, right? This is not always the thing to do. It kind of goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning about creating relationships with people. But to the extent that it's truly inappropriate, to the extent that it's just, it depends where it falls on the spectrum. One of my favorites, and I considered it inappropriate because it was politicking, is trustees would ask the question like this. They would say, Mr. Blue, isn't it true that? Now, any question that starts with, isn't it true that, is then followed by the answer they want, right? So I consider that to be inappropriate behavior. What you can all do when you're standing at the podium is to say, well, trustee X, as we have discussed before or whatever, you can tap dance around that. But if they're really inappropriate, if there's, and especially if it's escalating, don't let it escalate. Don't feel like you're ratting on somebody. Go talk to a superior about how to do this best. Because this discussion probably has to come from the manager, maybe even the mayor or village president.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is I recognize, and so does Michael, how difficult of a situation that is. But it is an HR issue. And now more than ever in today's world, any inappropriate activity that creates any uncomfortable issues within the workplace, and when it said inappropriate jokes, I'm assuming that is sexual in nature, derogatory in nature, what have you, that if we sit on that information, it only creates a future problem worse. So as difficult as it is, reporting it to your immediate boss is the correct thing to do.
Let's move on to stalling tactics, Peter. You and I both kind of like this one. Why don't you start?
So my take on this was, again, the words that came to mind were be careful. There may be, if I'm, the plan commission chair or one of the members, I may have reasons for wanting to stall. And so stalling is a tactic. Stalling is not necessarily inappropriate or illegal. And so we should be careful that again, as a staff, and I would say this as the village attorney also, it may not be up to me whether or not the board or the elected or appointed officials want to stall. And so I would not want to undercut them in their strategic decision to stall. Now, as when Michael and I were talking, Michael brought up an excellent point. There may be legal consequences for stalling too long. A lot of the codes have deadlines. And so, if you stall too long, some decision may be deemed denied or deemed approved. And that is the responsibility of staff or the village attorney to inform the elected or appointed officials. You can do whatever you want, but at some point you've got to make a decision because our code says within 90 days, within 100 days. So there's a possibility that there may be a drop dead date, but short of that, I think you just got to be a little careful about whether or not you're getting into a policy mode with regard to stalling tactics as opposed to, a staff mode. Michael, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that Peter and I both saw this a little bit differently. When I have seen stalling, I see it primarily as a group of people, a commission or a board that just doesn't want to make a decision, right? It's way easier to go, I don't know, how many trucks are there going to be again? I think they need to redo the traffic study and show us more information about the trucks. So the other part of stalling as a tactic is to avoid making a decision. And you don't want to let them do that. That goes back to communication again, right? What information do you need? Let's make sure you have it. The applicant's got to get you the information you need to make a good decision. But if they're stalling because they're just don't want to make an unpopular decision, that's something that you need to advance them a little bit on. The one that's on here, Peter, before you go, that the question, the Group 7 breakout, consulting your attorney, always a good idea. But the idea about developers having individual meetings with council members, the way it says, if appropriate, I get a little bit of a stomach ache at the notion. I would suggest to you it's not appropriate. Again, I did confess at the beginning of this that I am a control freak, but there, you got to control the measure. You got to control the discussion. If there's going to be a discussion with individual trustees or the mayors, there's got to be a staff member there.
Yeah, and that's a really long conversation about, because the answer is different whether you're talking about meetings with plan commission or ZBA members during a public hearing process, as opposed to meeting with council members or members of the corporate authorities after that public hearing is over. That legally there's different issues. And so I agree with Michael that you got to be very careful about that. So I'm glad they put if appropriate. I do want to comment one of the parts of this question, it seemed to be what does staff tell the developer? And my reaction was, you can only tell the developer what's going on, and you can say the council did X, Y, this, or the plan commission did X, Y, this. The developer's going to know if they're being stalled. Like, again, don't feel like you need to solve the developer's problem with the stalling tactic. You can only do so much, and then it's up to the elected appointed officials. And you can give the developer information that's appropriate to give them, but don't, again, I think you get into a little bit of dicey situation if you start strategizing with the developer about how to overcome the stalling tactics.
And it's probably a good reminder too that that the AICP Code of Ethics covers a lot of these things, and it's not an ethics session, but you could probably take all of these scenarios and use them for an ethics session. So I would refer you back to those principles that are part of being AICP, if you're a member of AICP, or just APA's principles for planning. Domineering commissioners, I think we decided there is no such thing and that we weren't going to talk about that. No, maybe we should. Actually, a lot of what we've been talking about relates to the domineering commissioners. So I don't know, Peter, if you had anything you wanted to touch on this that was different than what we've talked about elsewhere. Not really, just to everybody else is going to know that person's being domineering. Yeah. So it's not a secret. And others, to some extent, you got to rely on others to address it. You're not, if somebody's domineering, usually you're not going to be the one, just like the village attorney isn't going to be the one to change their personality. And I would point everybody to the notes that Group 7 took here. I think these are all really good. If you're going to start making rules, or one of the ones I like on here is, but if you're going to make rules, make them for everybody, right? So and we've all done this, I think, especially if you have children, right? So, if one of them is a problem, you pass a rule that applies to everybody. You don't say, sorry, only John cannot do this, but you apply rules that apply to everybody. And I think some of the ones that are on here in these notes are really good examples of doing that. We go to 4.
Great. Yeah, let's go on to Group 3.
Michael, you want to, 3, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the one where you said it's okay for people to lie.
Yeah, so fabricated testimony. It's an interesting choice of words, fabricated testimony. I think what it meant is somebody's testimony, parts of somebody's testimony are not true. And my response to that is, as a staff and as staff, stick to the fact. All we can do is stick to the facts as we know them. And if somebody from the public is going to stand up and say that this development's going to cause 1,000 trucks, and our staff report says it's going to cause 2 trucks, we've done our job. And we can, everybody will see our staff report. We can in the course of making our reports or your reports, you can say again what the facts are, but there's no real way to prohibit somebody from standing up and lying, as I like to say, or misstating the facts. The one thing I would say is we can prevent them from repeating the lie over and over and over and over again. Most procedural rules say, we don't have to allow testimony that's repetitive. So, that's something to talk to the chair in advance of the meeting. Not only it's good process, but it also, so the inappropriate or the incorrect information is not repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah, and Peter, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know there were a couple in here that you had some questions about that maybe you would do differently on that group 3 has listed here. I think this was it, but while you're looking at that and see if I actually remember correctly, I would just add that, there are opportunities for the municipality to get out the facts, right? And I have seen any number of communities that after a meeting or after every meeting of a controversial matter where there is a lot of baloney flying around, is that either on a website or in a memo to the plan commission or to the city council, that there's a list of what we absolutely know, right? So there is one place to go for facts. And I know facts have gotten kind of fungible in the last few years, but a good approach here is to take what you know to be the facts and to publish those, make those publicly available to people. Again, whether it's the website, newsletter, whatever.
Yeah, the one thing I would call out here, thanks, Michael, for the reminder. In the 4th comment, it's I think the shaming strategy. Ensure name and address are stated to help deter fabricated information. We are not allowed to require addresses anymore under the Open Meetings Act. So everybody, you can ask for name, but you cannot ask or you not require address. You can ask, but if they don't want to give it, they don't have to give it.
To move to staff support, I guess my one comment would be, I think that all the items that are on here are great. These are all really good ways to do this. But the suggestion I would make is that as a commission, whether it's the village clerk or the chair or somebody, to take the best of these things and turn them into a set of the plan commission's rules, right? So plan commissions are allowed to have their own bylaws, their own set of rules. Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, unless it's prohibited by the village code. So plan commissions are allowed to have their own rules. And so what I would suggest is take all these resources and turn them into, the top 10 things or top 20 things. I mentioned to the rest of the group, I was in a town not too long ago where they had this great little booklet about how we do things as a commission. It was compiled by the clerk and it was terrific. Had all the information they needed and was very customized to town. So I would definitely agree with the list that's here under notes, and I would suggest turning them into your own set of rules.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think that covered that one.
Yeah. I think personal vendetta, I think we had the feeling that that one was kind of covered with some of the others about who you talk to and do you go to your department head and whatnot. So maybe we move on to the next one.
Michael, let me start with the social media one.
Okay.
So this is an excellent question, and we get this question or these issues on social media literally every week. So let me just take a step back, because the question is, can staff control what the elected official posts on their private account? And the question is, what is a private account these days? So there's no question that municipalities, they almost all of them now have their own Facebook page, Twitter accounts, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And those are official sites. And because they're official sites, they are subject to FOIA. And they are subject to the First Amendment, which means that you can't really block. You run into problems if you start blocking selective comments. Once you start letting comments, then everybody gets to comment. So there's ways to deal with that. But what's tricky is when elected or appointed officials have their own social media accounts. And oftentimes those will be private or personal, not private, personal. The issue there is if somebody on their private Facebook account starts to post the village agenda, comment on their activities, their votes, their positions on village municipal issues, and has dialogue on that, then that quickly can become, under the law, a government site or a site that is subject to not only FOIA, but the First Amendment. And this, I'm not making this up because this happened. President Trump had a Twitter account, as you may recall, and at one point, early on in his term, he started blocking people who were critical of him on the Twitter account, and he got taken to court, and it wound its way all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which then it wound up there after he was out of office. So they said it was no longer a live case. But the lower courts said that was a First Amendment violation because the president was doing official business on that Twitter account, even though he personally set it up. So it's very important for staff to know about those social media accounts. And I know in a lot of towns I represent, we've had social media training with our elected and appointed officials, so they know exactly the pitfalls that can happen with social media. So it's an ongoing issue. It's not going away, and the best we can do is manage it.
And the group discussed this, decided I'm too old for social media, so I had no answer here.
Yeah, because Michael's opinion was don't do it. And
Just
I
don't.
said the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah.
It's not going back.
No, I would just echo what Peter said. Just keep it separate. Do not let do not let the municipal part of your life wander into your private accounts. It's that easy. And again, it goes back to what Peter said before too, which is no matter how many times you tell people, it's not necessarily going to work, but that's kind of the best you got. Scared chairman. Should we talk about scared chairman?
Yeah.
I think my 2 cents, I think the comments on here are really good. They're all about preparation and making the chairman be somewhat at ease to know what's going on. The one thing that's kind of implied here gets a little bit of mention, but I would emphasize is the idea of a script. I think a script is really useful, and just because if the chair gets stuck, all they have to do is look down and read. And so a script is really good. It can be as detailed. I've seen them as bullet points, and I've seen them as just here, read this. And you may have to do that for the first few meetings or the first 6 months or so until the chair is comfortable. The other thing to do is to get the chair used to looking down at you as staff and feeling comfortable just saying, well, what do we do now? Best chair I ever had was very comfortable looking down going, all right, Michael, now what do we do? And, that was great. You got to let them know that they're able to do that. And the other thing that I would share along these lines is that, being a plan commission is a team sport. I've seen more than a few very good vice chairs, if there is one, or one of the more experienced chairs in the middle of kind of a heated debate, lean over to the chair or raise their hand and say, Mr. Chair, isn't this about the time where we would close the public hearing and deliberate? Right. So the whole commission really needs to help out this chair. But I thought the comments here were good. I just wanted to emphasize script and team sport.
I have nothing to add. I agree with all that. On the virtual meetings, real quickly, I mean, all of those comments are correct. There's we've lived through it all of the obvious things with regard to spacing, whatever is as a policy matter. The other thing I said, how we do virtual meetings, that's that's a village or municipal wide decision. Because likely we can't or won't do one meeting different than we're doing the others. The process or the procedures we use for, especially for COVID safety, will be the same. So that's, that's a department-wide discussion. It's a manager and corporate authority-wide discussion on how we're going to handle virtual meetings going forward.
All right, should we move on to the last 3 questions here?
Yep. I like the last answer. Have a police officer in attendance.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peter.
5 years ago, we never had police officers involved in our meetings. And we could have a 2-hour conversation about the causes. But there's no question right now that there is more tension, more strongly held and strongly voiced opinions at plan commission, zoning meetings, and corporate authority meetings, and that people are more dug in the sand than they've ever been. And I've had several meetings, like numerous meetings, regularly this happens, where the chair had to shut somebody up or try to. And just last week, somebody would not sit down, and we had the police chief. I mean, I looked directly at the police chief and nodded to him, and he literally just got up from his chair and walked toward the podium and then walked by it. Didn't directly confront the person speaking, but the message was like super clear and it worked. But it was, again, it's not a decision to take lightly, obviously, because these meetings are public, and we don't want, God forbid, we don't want our police officers to be actively involved in zoning decision procedures. And it's something to discuss before the meetings with your department director and the manager about how to handle. I mean, and really, it's a good thing to have, like, every year, just sit down with the department and talk about, like, all these situations that can happen and how we're going to handle them. So we're not caught off guard when it happens, real time.
And I would just add, to go back to the idea of structure, right? Is have the rules set up, be clear that the rules apply to everybody. If it's about time limits on how long an item goes or whatever it is, I think that the idea of going back to structure here is a good one. I think the suggestions here are good. If there's you want to call a brief recess or a break. And the other thing I would go back to is something we said at the very beginning, is a lot of this gets dealt with before the meeting ever starts. Odds are, I know every time we had a contentious meeting, we got a bunch of phone calls before it and we knew it was coming. And so we had the opportunity to go back to people, and we intercepted people. That doesn't sound quite right, but I mean, we would spend time talking to people who were going to come and agitate the meeting and kind of talk them down before the meeting ever happened. So this is definitely one of these things you can get to before the meeting happens.
The note in the chat is absolutely correct that Paul Ellis raised is, if it gets too unruly, the board can always adjourn. If it's not productive anymore, they can adjourn or take a break, as Michael said.
Just for what it's worth, I saw the other note in the chat about getting that booklet from that plan commission of the community I was talking about. I'm on their website. It's not published, but I'll reach out to them and see if we can get it. And Gabby, Colleen, I'll get it to you and you can let people know about it. Commissioner training.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
You talk about my favorite Illinois APA topic, commissioner training. I'm all for it. But I don't think it's the answer on an annual basis, because you don't necessarily have that much turnover. I would tell you that I know that there's a national APA committee that's working on kind of more focused and specialized bits of training, so you can have kind of an ongoing training thing going on. That stuff's supposed to be out in the next 6 months or so. So yeah, ongoing training is good. Just don't make it repetitive. If you've got a bunch of new people coming in, yeah, absolutely. Do the training again. The thing that works great about the training, though, is it becomes the common language that everybody speaks. So for at least the next couple of years that you've got the commission, if people are sort of regressing from the training that they had, one of the things that we suggest to chairs of plan commissions and to staff members is to very politely say, well, remember, Mr. Commissioner, we talked about this. Remember when those folks from Illinois APA were here? We talked about this and we decided that we would do X, Y, and Z in this sort of situation. So it becomes sort of a fallback to politely remind people that they're regressing. But continually repeating the same training will make people a little bit immune to it.
On the motion drama, there should be no drama with motions. And the notes to this are all excellent. I have no disagreement with any of that. The only thing I would add is that, and the reason I said no drama is there is absolutely nothing wrong if the chairman looks to you and said, what would the appropriate motion be for us to recommend denial of this petition? And if then you say the proper motion would be, we move to recommend denial of petition number blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with that. It happens to village attorneys all the time. And it happens to, I think, planners. There's nothing, they're still voting. And so they're the ones voting. You're not putting your thumb on the scale by saying the motion for them, whether at the meeting or in the staff report. So I don't have a fear about this at all. So long as the motion is made, and if you say the motion is this and somebody says so moved, that's fine. So long as it's then seconded and so the vote is made appropriately, that's all. There's no court that's going to say, no, I'm sorry, those words had to come out of a commissioner's mouth and not a staff member's mouth. It's just, that is not a restriction. So don't be fearful of them asking this question. But a lot of in the staff report, that's a great idea too.
A lot of the drama that we see and a lot of the results from confusion, because what you've got is a motion that not everybody agrees with. And so then you get into what I like to call amendment fest, where all of the commissioners want to raise their 2 cents and say, well, I move that we amend the motion to allow for cars to be parked backwards, upside down in the hill, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. And then somebody goes, yeah, we should do that. And then you start to get confusion as to whether or not we're voting on the original motion, the motion with the amendment, or just the amendment. Now, Robert's rules would tell you vote on all the amendments, and then you vote on what's left of the main motion, right? So understanding that structure is important. But the thing that's most important is that there's clarity in the motion, right? So people aren't confused about, well, is that amendment part of it, or is that? So as staff, feel free to read it again, make sure people know what they're voting for. I would add to Peter's comments that, I'm more concerned about clarity of the motion that's being made than what anybody is actually moving. And I saw the comment in here, Peter, maybe you can comment on this too, because we do this when we do commissioner training, is to recommend that all motions be made in the positive so that people know that a yes vote is for and a no vote is against.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm glad that came up. There are some times for quirky procedural reasons where somebody wants to move to deny something. And sometimes we do both. We say, okay, hold on, first, let's do a motion to approve. And if that fails, if somebody wants to say, now I want a motion that says we're definitively against something, I let them do it. So, but I agree, the first thing should be a motion in the affirmative. That makes life a little easier.
Yeah, and I agree too. Again, as long as everybody is clear. In fact, a lot of times I've seen chairs will do this. They will look up and down the dais and say, is everybody clear on the motion? And that you can almost just put that in your quiver and have that every time. Just don't take a vote if it's a complicated one. You know, feel free to say, you as staff, is everybody clear on the motion, or would you like me to repeat it? I bet that every time you do that with a complex motion, somebody will ask you to repeat it because they don't know what they're voting for, and you don't want to let that happen.
And so I just want to, that brings up another point, and I know we're just before we end here. I said at the beginning, procedural versus substance. The reason I say that is that when a municipality makes a decision on a zoning matter, the law in Illinois is that decision is presumed valid. And in order to challenge that on the substance, it's a very difficult thing to do for an objector or a developer to prove that, because they've got to show by clear and convincing evidence that that decision is arbitrary and capricious. Very difficult. It's a completely different thing if we mess up procedurally. There's no presumption with regard to an improper procedure. So if we don't get the vote right, if we don't do the public hearing right, if we don't, you know, if the motion's not clear, then that allows the developer or whoever wants to challenge it to challenge on procedure, and judges, they'll take a procedural ruling every step of every day of the week. If they can get rid of a case because there was been a procedural error, they'll do that rather than get to the substance. So that's why I always say, let's make sure we get the procedure right. And then the substance, you know, we'll have our expert opinions on and everything, but that the elected and the appointed officials get to make. And it's very hard to overcome we got to set the table for them so that their decision can withstand any challenge.
Peter, I don't know if you saw, there's a question in the chat about making the motion in the affirmative potentially being misleading to citizens who read the agenda. I assume that means that the motion or the draft motion is on the agenda. I don't know if maybe you had some suggestions on how to deal with that. Again, I would just go back to being clear that that what the motion is and what people are voting for. That should hopefully clarify it for those in the audience as well.
Yeah, and it's some of this goes back to the local code, because some of the local code says if a petition is not approved by an X date, then it's deemed denied or deemed approved. And so you want the motion, and so anything other than approval will be denial. So that's what I mean. Some of this is local, but I agree with Michael, whether it's a motion to deny, whether it's a motion to approve, it's just got to be clear on what the legal effect is going to be. And that's, you know, you should plan for that in advance, and you should talk to your village attorney.
Wonderful.
I think those are great words to end on. Talk to your village attorney.
Or your planner.
Well, thank you, Michael and Peter, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We are right at 1:30, so really appreciate that you took time away from your busy schedule to join us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.